All right, let's get started on Israel, Hamas, IDF strikes UN school in Gaza, killing 40.
Israeli fighter jet struck in the middle of the night. The people were sleeping, huddled in an UNRWA school in Deir al-Balah, as so often in this war. A place that should have been safe, but wasn't. The Gazan Health Ministry...
For the record, I need you to understand something. This is central Gaza, okay? This is not Rafah. This is a UNRWA school turned into another, refugee camp, basically. People are inside the school, and Israel, unsurprisingly, bombed it.
School had terrorists who actually took part in the murderous attack of October the 7th. We took them out.
Please just notice what the reporter says at the end, and now she does a Hamas is responsible take. Yeah. Sorry, children and women that we just killed. 40 of you, the majority of the people killed in this refugee camp being women and children. We've decided, Hamas. You are now Hamas.
Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists of the Nukba forces. They obviously sought to exploit the school and and shelter there.
This is so funny because he's like, yes, they thought that we held back if there were women and children there. And boy, were they wrong. We do not hold back. Have you not seen what we've done for the past 8 months?
Catastrophe on a scale that it's very hard to believe unless you see it, with many children, but also people of all ages.
Genuinely, honestly, what is the argument Israel's use when people ask why they don't just go arrest the Hamas guys instead of bombing the entire hospital? No one makes that argument because it is taken for granted that Israel gets to do what Israel wants to do. How are we going to make this argument? Almost 40,000 people have been slaughtered over the course of the past 8 months.
Today, the Israel Defense Forces put out footage of their troops operating in Rafah. Although the Americans have presented the latest proposal for a temporary, then permanent ceasefire as an Israeli initiative, it's not. Neither Hamas nor Israel has...
It's crazy because it's like they said that this was the Israeli proposal. Biden said this was the Israeli proposal. Why is Israel not signing on to its own proposal? It's just so weird. Please explain to chat why all Israelis despise UNRWA and go out of their way to vilify them, even though the UNRWA in Gaza is run by a highly respected, decorated United States retired Army general. You know why they hate UNRWA, right? Without UNRWA's presence, Palestinians aren't technically refugees, so they will have no right to return or something. It's a evil loophole. It's that, and also because UNRWA literally hires Palestinians. UNRWA is the Refugee Relief Works Agency for the United Nations. It almost entirely works with Palestinians, however. The UN, I guess, in some weird way, feels responsible for, not weird way, obvious way, feels responsible for the creation of Israel. So they were like, we got to do something. The entirety of UNRWA basically works with Palestinian refugees for the most part. UNRWA is a lifeline for the Palestinians. They get money, they get the international community's funds, and basically hire Palestinians. That's how UNRWA works. Yeah, it is the largest employer of Gazans in general.
The school was sheltering 6,000 people. Given the population of Gaza, the majority of those people will have been women and children. We've heard reports and estimates of between 35 and 45.
I agree the framing is wild because Israel has all the power to stop the warfare, but that guy was literally cursing the leader of Hamas word for word. Yeah, of course. That is also understandable. I think a lot of people forget that the Palestinian population of the Gaza Strip are not a monolithic force either. The fuck are we doing? Yeah, it's perfectly valid and perfectly understandable for people to also be very upset at Yahya Sinwar or any number of different Hamas leadership, depending on what their framework is, depending on what they think is going on. He's looking at a massacred family member. You can't criticize someone cursing the names of who thinks are responsible for the mangled bodies in front of them. Wait, what? I'm not doing that. The fuck are you talking about? I'm not doing that at all. There's polling done in Gaza. I don't know how the they do it, but there's still Palestinians being polled inside of Gaza. It's not like Hamas is 100% approval rating. Hamas's approval rating only increases in times of Israel's bombing campaigns, only to decrease later down the line. They're not exactly great at civil governance in general. They're not exactly super popular. They never were super popular. They were never as popular as they are now, all things considered. They've always been more popular in the West Bank than they are in Gaza for the most part. That's really important to remember. But a part of the reason why people are probably frustrated is because of the Israeli narrative that they try to beef up all the goddamn time. They're hiding amongst the civilian population, and therefore it gives Israel righteous cause. Now, ultimately, obviously, from where I'm standing, I can make the calculation that it is ultimately still Israel's responsibility. And the example would be if a Ukrainian turned around and was like, God damn you, Zelensky, why wouldn't you just concede to Russian interest, you would never in a million years see that on mainstream media. No mainstream media outlet would show that Ukrainians' perspective because everyone understands it's ultimately Russia's fault. It's crazy. Except nobody ever makes that analysis because people are desperate to always align themselves with whoever the America has decided are the good guys in every conflict. My only frustration with this would ultimately still be that it is up to the media to like show what is the prevailing narrative in general, and also beyond that, do their very best to showcase exactly who is responsible. It's ridiculous. When Russia bombs a civilian, a mall or whatever, nobody goes, oh man, it's really that like Ukrainian soldiers have frequented this mall. That would be ridiculous. It is still a war crime. Just like what Israel is doing is a war crime. PCPSR releases polls every 1 to 2 months, and you can compare West Bank attitudes with Gaza. Pretty interesting. Yeah, West Bank is always way more ride or die for Hamas than the people actually living under Hamas by a pretty solid margin. And that is because they don't exist under Hamas, so they only see Hamas as a defensive measure. If you were to poll not Palestinians, but just like American leftists, they would probably be way more pro-Hamas than the entirety of the Palestinian population. That's why you hear a lot of people in the Western world say things along the lines of like, no, these guys have to fight till every last Palestinian or whatever. And that's because like we do have a way more bloodthirsty culture here in the Western world. Ironic because we don't consider ourselves as under those terms or conditions, but we are way more bloodthirsty than the supposedly barbaric Arab monsters that we are talking about here.
What do you make of what happened in that facility overnight?
This was an attack on a crowded UN facility that is protected under humanitarian law.
Well, it's protected under humanitarian law and it's run by the UN, but here is my counter. Hamas, I rest my case. I rest my case. Have you considered Hamas? Yahya Sinwar, Hamas. Do you know what Israel's excuse for not having operational control over North and Central Gaza? No, they have no excuse. You have to remember, if you believe, like I do, that Israel's higher goal here isn't necessarily to like eradicate Hamas, but instead to eradicate a decent chunk of the Palestinian population, that won't go so above and beyond that like the Western world will still give it assurances and support and expend social and political capital to defend them while still giving them a steady flow of munitions, because they would run out of ammo pretty quickly if it wasn't for America, while simultaneously the complete destruction of all civil infrastructure so that Palestinians have nowhere to live but rubble. If that is their ultimate goal, Hamas is good for them. Like Hamas being able to operate in Central Gaza and in North Gaza is not necessarily a bad thing. It's a good thing because they can always point to it and go, see, Hamas. Now, of course, that doesn't make sense from the Israeli perspective, because the Israeli perspective should be, I thought you eviscerated Hamas in Central Gaza. I thought you eviscerated Hamas in North Gaza. And now you're saying they still exist in North Gaza. They still exist in Central Gaza. Sometimes Hamas even lobs missiles into Israel. What the is going on? Ultimately, for them, it's perfect because, as I mentioned, they can simply point to it and say, this is why we have to keep blowing up.
We can't verify what's going on in there with our own eyes, with our team.
By the way, the reason why people don't ask that question inside of Israel is because the higher goal, the higher purpose of this like siege, just like every other siege, is shared by the broader Israeli public as well. That's the reason. It's shared by the broader Israeli public. They also want the IDF to keep, eviscerating Gaza. Yeah, polling throughout the month since October shows the average Israeli doesn't think they're hitting them hard enough. Yes. Specifically, overwhelming support from the Jewish Israeli population, which is comprised of 75% of the Israeli population, almost always overwhelmingly supported the notion that the IDF is not bombing Gaza hard enough. Even when directly asked about the civilian casualties, that calculation does not change. Daniel Hagari, of course, came out immediately and was like, they are terrorists operating inside of a UN school. UNRWA is working with the terrorists.
The IDF conducted a precise intelligence-based strike, targeted dozens of Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists hiding inside a UN school in Gaza. Some of these terrorists participated in the Hamas massacre of October 7th.
This is for Americans and the Western world to hear. In Hebrew, he doesn't have to make these defenses. In Hebrew, he's just like, yeah, we killed him. It's great. It's awesome. Who gives a But to the Western world, he has to be like, here is why we killed a bunch of women and children today, knowing full well a lot more people are paying attention and a lot more people associating Israel's bombing campaigns with the negative connotation of killing women and children, majority women and children, which is what they did again, because this is where refugees were sleeping when they did that.
We stopped a ticking time bomb. This is what it was.
Every time we blow up a school, it's a ticking time bomb, guys. You don't understand. It's a ticking time bomb of Hamas.
We delayed our strike twice because we identified civilians in the area.
So why did you choose not to delay it then? What changed? You still ended up killing a load of civilians. What the I think directly 5 children out of the 40, and the majority of those killed were women and children again.
We had aerial surveillance that had been monitoring the Hamas compound for a few days. We conducted the strike once our intelligence and surveillance indicated that there were no women or children inside the Hamas compound, inside those
So how did women and children die regardless?
classrooms. Despite the complex operational conditions, our Air Force used precise munitions to target the 3 specific classrooms that the terrorists were hiding inside. Here are some of the terrorists who were hiding inside the UN school in Nuseirat, who we eliminated before they could carry out more attacks against Israelis. Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists, some from the Nukhba force, terrorists with blood on their hands.
Bro, you have blood on your hands. F you mean? You are currently describing the blood you have on your hands of women and children. I cannot believe these terrorists have blood on their hands. This is why we had to kill all of the women and children, which were valid.
These are only a few of the terrorists we eliminated. There are more. Some of them took part in the brutal massacre of October 7th. We are working to verify the
Yeah, they are really using the defense of if a school shooter was holding kids hostage, we should blow up the school. Oh, 100%. 100%. How do we not know that they are just regular civilian men? They could be, or they could be actual Islamic Jihad militants, or even part of the Nukhba force staying in the UN facility. Not everyone is literally hiding in the tunnels. You have to remember that.
The IDF will continue to operate according to international law. The systematic abuse of UN facilities is a war crime, and it must be stopped by the world. We will continue to do everything in our power to bring our hostages.
This is another one of my favorite arguments that Israel deploys regularly. It's like it's Hamas that's doing a war crime. It's not us. They're doing a double war crime because they're causing us to do a war crime by doing a war crime.
As we fulfill this mission, we will continue exposing the true face of Hamas to the world. Thank you.
Hamas and Islamic Jihad, usually in Telegram channels, will openly reveal when any of their militants have been martyred. I don't know if they have about these guys. If they will say, though, if they have died, if they've been killed, they will say, like, these were our guys. They got martyred. I don't know. I have no way of checking. Maybe there's people in here that could. I think that people on the ground, people that are there, have said that, no, of course they weren't operating out of the UN facility, but you can't really trust them because they're Arab, you know, they're all Hamas technically. But the fact that they're actually showing faces and whatnot probably implies that they were most likely in the facility, most likely staying in the facility. I doubt that they were shooting out of the facility or anything like that. Since October 7, there's something that I have brought up over and over and over and over again. And that is that you cannot conduct a war like this. The reason why they are hiding inside of the civilian population is because more often than not, that is their family members that you are killing alongside them. We know this from the Where's Daddy AI targeting system that they have, not just Lavender, but also the Where's Daddy alert system that informs the Israeli Air Force or the Israeli drone strikers to hit certain targets when they go home and are around their families. I've covered this extensively. Here it is. This is from 2 months ago. This is the video if you guys want to learn more about it. There's also an article from 972 magazine. That is the article I'm reading here by Yuval Abraham, who found that there is a AI targeting system called Lavender that populates targets for the drones to target. And also on top of that, drone operatives are alerted when a suspected suspected militant is home alongside their family members. That's when they strike. So something to consider. Just so you understand what Israelis see, the main front page headline at Ynet right now is IDF reveals the identity of terrorists eliminated at UNRWA school attacking international media. The Ma'arif headline was the world was angry at the strike on the school. Now it was revealed what was hiding there. While Wallah's was IDF spokesperson operating in Rafah is difficult and takes time. Though neither was on the front page, they either omit the truth or straight up act as IDF spokespeople. Of course they do. The Israeli media is insane with the way that it operates. You know, this doesn't mean that there aren't like good journalists in Israel. There certainly are, and sometimes they are literally better at doing real journalism out of Israel than the Western media is, but most of the popular outlets are operating alongside the IDF. State spokesperson was asked about Israeli strike on UN school. How does this not cross the red line the president laid out? I suspect that his answer is going to be, well, it's not in Rafah, and the red line is supposed to be about Rafah, but not really.
Where Hamas is hiding inside a school, other militants are hiding inside a school. Those individuals are legitimate targets, but at the same time, they're embedded near civilians. Israel has a right to try and target those civilians, but they also have the obligation.
I mean, it's a Freudian slip, but like, can you blame him, bro? Can you blame him? Can you blame him? I mean, Israel is targeting civilians every day, dog. Of course. After a certain point of repeating that over and over again, he's gonna inevitably blurt it out. Israel has a right to target the civilians. Functionally, what he's saying is that regardless, here he is in color, 4K.
Israel has a right to try and target those civilians, but they also have the obligation to minimize civilian harm and take every step possible to minimize civilian harm. So that's why we were pressing the government of Israel and the IDF to be completely transparent about what happened here. We want to know the facts as much as anyone.